Dumelang. My name is Motene, and in this video I'll be sharing insights with you as an industrial psychologist who's trained and registered with the HPCSA to give you a better understanding of what the scope of practice looks like for industrial psychologists in this SA context and in relation to the other psychology categories in the broader psychology profession. One of the main focus areas of industrial psychologists would be on applying psychology at work. It really is psychology at work, whether it is the work of individuals, the work of teams, or the work of organizations. Ultimately, it is a focus on helping people to reach their potential in positive ways that contribute to their well-being and contribute to them thriving and performing better, developing more effectively, and gaining a much better understanding of themselves while still remaining intact and still focusing on their well-being. And from a team perspective, it is a focus on how people in a team would interact together and relate to one another in order to work towards a common goal, which is what would be driving the performance of the team and feeding into the performance of the greater organization. From an organizational perspective, it would be a focus on organizational needs when it comes to what the people in an organization need, as well as what leaders would be needing to do in order to guide and lead their people towards greater heights as individual employees, as teams, and as the organization remains sustainable as well. So all the people processes within organizations is what industrial psychologists would be looking at, the underlying dynamics that apply to all of those human processes, and working very closely with human resource practitioners and very closely with leaders in organizations. So some industrial psychologists, in terms of a day in the life of an industrial psych, choose to work in private practice, offering consulting services to companies as their clients, or to individuals or to groups. And some industrial psychologists prefer to work within organizations, giving advice and support to people and working very closely with maybe learning and development specialists, very closely with recruitment and selection specialists, or very closely with talent managers and HR practitioners who are focusing on the people strategy of their organizations. But in essence, we would be bringing the psychology to the table and helping leaders of organizations to manage people in such a way that it allows for any hindrances in underlying dynamics to be ironed out, but also allows for people to thrive in the way that they need to, and for leaders to be as effective as they can be in their leading, in their managing, and in their development of people. So coaching is an aspect of what industrial psychologists do. Some industrial psychs choose to practice solely as coaches. Others prefer to bring in that mentoring and coaching expertise into the way that they would be engaging with various stakeholders in a company, or working alongside HR business partners. Some industrial psychologists enjoy the people process and practice side of things so much that they prefer to take on HR managerial roles and offer their psychological expertise in that way. Psychometric assessments and competency-based assessments are still a big part of what industrial psychologists do. It's just that the assessments that we are trained in are assessments that focus on organizational contexts and that can be used to enhance the effectiveness of people in that particular context, and also enhance the well-being of teams in a work context. Outside of an organizational or corporate context, some industrial psychologists enjoy varied work. Some prefer to work in educational settings, for example, whether they would be program researchers, whether they would be program coordinators, whether they would be in managerial roles overseeing the development of programs within their psychology discipline, or within human resource management, within coaching, and those forms of applying psychology in work contexts. Some industrial psychologists enjoy the psycho-legal side of things, so being expert witnesses in court and dealing with cases where maybe there's future loss of income, and now we needing to do psychological assessments, or even stand as expert witnesses on behalf of clients in order to give guidance to what the quality of work life would look like, and what opportunities from a career perspective would look like for a client who has maybe been severely impacted by injury, accidents, or anything that would have affected their psychological functioning and psychological well-being. And with regards to other types of work, those in consulting sometimes enjoy working with clients and in a facilitative type of way. So think of workshop facilitation and running those type of interventions that would enable almost a systemic wide approach to be applied. So a workshop that will benefit the individuals who are attending it, but also still benefit the team that a person belongs to or works in, or still benefit an organization, be it an NGO, be it a church, be it a school. Wherever there are people at work, there is a place for industrial psychologists to apply psychology at work. Some of the challenges associated with practicing as an industrial psychologist, one of them still has to do with the fact that a lot of people don't quite understand what industrial psychologists do, and some people confuse it with HR, assuming that it is solely focused on processes and practices, and forgetting that there's a very strong psychology orientation to it, and an application of psychological principles, paradigms, models, and processes to the work that industrial psychologists do. And another challenge that I also find with this particular field is that there is just so much variety in terms of what we can do. And although there isn't necessarily a counseling aspect or a clinical psychology orientation to what we do, but a lot of the principles from these categories of psychology are still also what we would be applying when we consider unconditional positive regard, for example, is something that I will still need to be applying to my work in my context. And whether I am working with an individual or an organization, that still applies, that all the ethical considerations would still need to apply to the service offering that I would be giving.